Good evening, and tonight I'm going to tell you another story by Sean McManus. This one is called Meeting the Guernsey Witch. Like each of the Channel Islands, Guernsey can be a magical place. That is not to say that Guernsey's full of magicians, or that people are wandering around with books of magical spells, doing spells all day. No. I'm talking about the witches and the pooks. They don't go around doing spells and unspeakable things in broad daylight either, in front of other humans. Or at least, not that I know about. Being an adult now. It was one calm and sunny summer evening when Corinne and Ben were returning from rock pooling near Lihu Island that they quite unexpectedly fell into a world of magic. As usual, Randolph, their cocker spaniel and constant companion, was running ahead of them as they looked back to see the causeway now covered with water. The children had just paused on the cobbles of the great granite slipway, watching their group of Guernsey donkeys on the path above them, with the yap and tail wagging so fast that it became a blur. The excitable little spaniel disappeared round the bend with his nose glued to the ground, hunting for anything he could find. The children indeed scampered after him, but just as they rounded the bend, Randolph was nowhere to be seen. Being a quiet evening, the children were reluctant to shout too loudly for the dog, but they did whistle in the way their dad had taught them. Can you whistle? It's not something I can do. Maybe I'll have to get Ben and Corinne's dad to teach me. Indeed, a whistle usually worked, resulting in a little spaniel sprinting and panting, running up to their favourite humans, indeed hoping for some sort of reward. But on this occasion, it didn't work. It left Corinne and Ben with only a dry mouth and feeling slightly embarrassed that they'd let their dog run off. Imagine letting a dog run off, thinking of all the mystery and things it could get up to. Oh, I don't want to even imagine. Dogs running after golf balls on a golf course, chasing ducks in a pond, all sorts of chaos that could cause humans such trouble. Ben soon realised that the lead was still looped around his waist, not wanting it to fall off from rock pooling just minutes earlier. The two children looked awkwardly at each other and set off in pursuit of their dog. "We better find him," said a worried Corinne. "Dad will be mad if we're too late, and Mum will be so upset if we lost him." "Oh, don't worry," replied Ben cheerfully. "Even if we couldn't find Randolph, Randolph would indeed find us. I know another dog like that. Do you?" As the children hurried along the lane, they had more sharp yaps which appeared to be coming from a patch of gorse behind the small junction. Fortunately, there was no traffic and no other humans visible. Panting, the pair of them reached the junction and crossed into the small grassy area beyond. By now they could hear sniffing and snuffling into the gorse just ahead of them. The children followed the path right across the grass and followed it past the mound, and which was pretty partly overgrown, with the serious large stones still visible around the base. "Wow, what's this?" asked the curious Corinne, almost forgetting that she was supposed to be looking for her now lost spaniel. "This way, I can hear them close by," came Ben's response, which seemed to completely ignore Corinne's curiosity. Brothers. Ben spotted the spaniel in the undergrowth on the left side of the path that was slightly further forward, and he dashed forward ahead to catch Randolph by his collar. But Randolph's attention was totally focused upon another shadowy, green-like figure which moved fast ahead of him. Ben watched in amazement, his jaw dropped to the ground, as the green figure shot across the path just right in front of him. Randolph was closely focused, and his yaps turned into the best barks any self-respecting spaniel could manage. His tongue was almost dragging upon the ground as he panted, well, after whatever happened to be ran ahead of him. Corinne! You've got to see this!" yelled Ben. "Oh, see what?" asked Corinne as she came up the path behind her brother. What Randolph is chasing?" called Ben without turning round. "Well, I expect there's a rabbit daft enough to be out in daylight," said Corinne. "Rabbits have 4 legs," announced Ben breathlessly. "Tell me something I don't know already," replied Corinne somewhat sarcastically, beginning now to get bored. "But this thing only had 2 legs," realised Ben, ignoring his sister's sarcasm. "What thing?" asked Corinne, her curiosity quickly once more aroused. I don't know. panted Ben, beyond the mounds. But maybe it's one of those, pooks. The two children moved forward together and carefully peered past the path, which now parted into the grassy glade. Then, just to their right, they saw what looked like a cave. An opening, dark and mysterious, lay between two large upright stones, and a grassy roof seemed to be growing out of the big stone, which was lying sideways to form the roof of the cave. There was no sign of Randolph, but Corinne and Ben could hear something scratching inside the cave. First, the children looked at each other uncertainly. Neither of them wanted to be the first to admit that they were both a little bit unsure of what was ahead. At that moment, Randolph emerged from the cave, still panting heavily, and trotted over towards Corinne and Ben. He made no attempt to escape, as Ben took the lead around for his waist and attached it securely to Randolph's collar. Instead, the little dog looked up at his friends, clearly pleased with himself and his evening's work. He prided upon himself in his ability to spot, to smell, and to chase cats, rabbits, and rats, and any other creature that his humans were just too slow to chase. Ben leaned over and patted Randolph playfully. He asked, "What was it, old boy?" It was a pook. A pesky pook," replied Randolph smugly. "Oh, and I'm not that old, thank you very much." Ben dropped the lead and looked open-mouthed towards his sister. Although Corinne was also visibly shocked, she recovered quite quickly, enough to say, He spoke. That is Randolph. You actually spoke to us. And about pooks." "He did? He really did!" exclaimed Ben. "I heard him too." The children stared at their dog in disbelief. Randolph looked back up at each of them in turn. He looked just as he always did. Stumpy tail wagging, long pink tongue dripping, long black ears drooping each side of his proud head, and bright, beady eyes fixed adoringly up at his favourite humans. Ben reached down and grabbed Randolph's lead. He now held it more tightly. "Randolph," began Corinne importantly, did you actually speak to us, or are we dreaming?" "I did speak to you," came the same voice as before, although Randolph's mouth did not appear to be doing anything other than panting. Corinne and Ben exchanged glances. Neither had ever encountered a situation quite like this before. "Oh, same old stupid humans," came the voice again, but this time from the gorse beyond the clearing. "Some humans are even dumber than their dogs," called another voice. This one came from inside the cave. At this point, Randolph turned and leapt towards the second voice, pulling the lead from Ben's tight grip and rushing forward towards the stone-framed cave. The two children rushed over there after their little spaniel, quite forgetting their earlier uncertainty. They followed the dog into the cave, but it was too dark to see anything inside. Although they could hear Randolph barking, the sound amplified in the small stone-lined chamber. As their eyes adjusted to the gloom, the children could make out a row of standing stones either side of the cave and several at the back. All seemed to be holding up two large scapestones which made up the roof. Randolph was barking and scratching at one of the stones at the back of the cave, but there was no sign of anybody or anything else. After taking some moments to study their surroundings, the children retraced their steps until once more they stood on the grass, declining in the evening light. Time must have passed as the sun was dipping towards the western sky. It would be another wonderful sunset beyond Leahu Island. Randolph too trotted out to join them, once again clearly pleased that he had seen any threat to humans. "We'd better head home," suggested Corinne. "Mum and Dad will be worried, and they'd certainly be wondering where we are." As they turned to the path, the two children could hear the distinct sound of laughter. It seemed to be coming from inside the mound. There came a sound of singing. It was a song about them. "Corinne, Kate, and Benny too simply didn't have a clue who we were or what we do. We tricked their dog and we tricked them too. Ha 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 hoo." "How rude!" exclaimed Corinne angrily. "That's just like Randolph's voice, and it says something about pooks," pointed out Ben. "Pooks!" shrieked Corinne. "Am I might have guessed by now. But I never got a clearer view of the one Randolph was chasing through the gorse, said Ben. I wish we could have seen him properly, added Corinne. Do you really? Asked a gentle voice behind them. Corinne and Ben turned in surprise to see that they had been joined by a calmly distinguished lady with a warm smile and very alert eyes. Good evening, said Corinne politely. I'm Corinne, and this is my brother Ben, and this is our dog, Randolph, our favourite Cocker Spaniel, she added, pointing to the boy and dog in turn. Yes, I know, came the calm reply, but I'm very pleased that you have the good manners to introduce yourself properly. The distinguished lady looked and smiled warmly before leaning over to pat Randolph. For his part, the little spaniel wagged his tail and licked the lady's hand as if he'd known her all her life. But how do you know? Stumbled Ben. We've never met you before. Have we? The gentle lady looked down at Ben, over her pair of glasses that were finely balanced upon the end of her nose, but below the broad brim of a tall black hat, which was decorated with green and white ribbons. At a familiar whimper, she leaned down to fuss Randolph again. He seemed to be entirely familiar with the new arrival. Of course, Randolph and I are old friends, said the wearer of the black hat. This assertion prompted the yap of agreement from the little spaniel and a further boot of a vigorous tail wagging. Once more, Corinne and Ben exchanged meaningful looks. Corinne summoned up her considerable reserves of social courage and directly but politely posed a question which was burning in her brain. Excuse me for being so direct, but might you be the Guernsey witch? The lady finished Corinne's question for her. Yes, yes, chimmed Corinne and Ben in unison. Yes, indeed, came the calm response. But before any further questions could be posed, the lady in black drew herself up and, drawing an arm from beneath her black cloak, made a waving signal which resulted in a very glossy magpie flying down from above the mound and alighting above her left shoulder. The glossy bird winked broadly at Randolph, who responded with a further yap of approval. The Guernsey witch smiled at the children before pointing at the mound behind them. Do you know what this place is called? She asked. Ben and Corinne shook their heads. Well, began the Guernsey witch, this is the fairy cave, or Le Huguet de Pouc Mound, and it is well known for where Poucs gather. Many of Poucs are mistakenly believed to be this is one of the entrances to the land of the Poucs, but this is not quite true. Poucs live alongside us. They merely choose to have their home underground. By now, the developing dusk was already affording the entrance to the fairy cave. It was clearly a mystical and magical place. The sound of clapping hands and stamping feet reached out from their ears and standing on the grass beside their path. The sound grew louder, and it seemed to be coming from inside the mound. The witch gestured to the children and their dog to move backwards towards the entrance of the cave beneath the mound. As they reached the entrance, the sun was setting, and they were just in time to see the stones of the rear of the cave open towards them inside their invisible hinges. The Guernsey witch waited to one side of the entrance, with a magpie still sitting on her shoulder. Randolph sat alongside the strange pair while the children stepped back and watched open mouthed as a procession of green-clad Poucs marched out from behind the stone and past the observers. Some of the Poucs were playing strange-looking musical instruments, and others clapped in time to their steps. Many carried sharp spears, and nearly all of them were singing loudly and trying to look fierce. We are the Lords of Lihu, we sing on Sundays, we march on Mondays, we trick on Tuesdays, we work on Wednesdays, we threaten on Thursdays, and we fight on Fridays. We are invincible. The marching Poucs ignored those watching. They marched with eyes ahead and seemed to be giving all their attention to the marching and singing. They snaked out of the cave and around the mound before marching along the path, down the lane, towards the beach. To the further amazement of Corinne and Ben, the Guernsey witch waited until the last poop had passed, the stone door had closed behind the final rank before summoning the children and their dog along the path in the opposite direction. Within a few moments, the party arrived at another clearing in the gorse and brambles. A click of the witch's fingers resulted in several sticks seeming to detach themselves from the surrounding of the undergrowth before aligning themselves in a tight bundle and hovering just in the front of those gathered in the clearing. I've got a nice picture to show you here, look. What can you see in here? This is what Corinne and Ben were exposed to. And now, dear children, and of course, my beloved Randolph, I must wend my way towards another place. Come on, Mickey, let's fly. With that, the Guernsey witch hopped onto the bundle of sticks, which had materialised into a single broomstick. She grinned and winked broadly at the children and the dog before beckoning to the magpie. Then the bird and broom rose slowly into the growing gloom of a lovely still evening before turning westward and moving off towards the western sky, which still housed the magical hint of magical red glow so typical of dusk along Guernsey's wondrous west coast. "Wow!" exclaimed Corinne after a few moments. "Did we really meet the Guernsey witch?" We did, called an excited Ben. "And we saw pooks too. Lots of them." Randolph yapped at his agreement before tugging his leaves and pulling Ben once more towards the trackway alongside the mound. "Time for tea," Corinne said wearily, wondering whether she'd remembered to bring a torch. "Yes, indeed," said Ben, who was already being dragged along the path by a little spaniel who seemed so at ease with the witch, but only too purposeful in pursuing the pooks. "They'll never believe us at home," suggested Corinne cautiously. "That's because you'll never tell them," said Ben. "I'll say nothing if you say nothing." "What do you say, Randolph?" asked Corinne. The happy spaniel looked up, wagged his ever eager tail, and yapped in agreement. I'm glad you could join me for all that story. Hope to see you again soon for another one, eh? Cheery for now, though, eh?